The conference room fell into a suffocating silence as Marcus Blackwell entered, his $1,000 shoes clicking against the marble floor like a judge's gavel. Every head in the room bowed instinctively. Every eye found refuge in paperwork or smartphone screens. Every spine curved just slightly forward in involuntary deference. The billionaire's reputation preceded him like a storm cloud, dark and unforgiving. He had built an empire by crushing competitors and dismissing anyone who dared waste his time. In the world of Blackwell Industries, fear was the currency that bought compliance, and everyone in that Boston headquarters had learned to spend it generously. Everyone, that is, except one man who had nothing left to lose. James Morrison pushed his cleaning cart forward through the corridor adjacent to the glass-walled conference room, the wheels squeaking softly against the polished floor. He wore the navy blue uniform of the janitorial staff, his name badge slightly crooked, his hands rough from years of scrubbing and wiping. At 42, James carried the weight of the world on his shoulders, visible in the slight hunch of his back and the permanent worry lines etched across his forehead. He was a single father to 7-year-old Emma, a bright-eyed girl who was currently fighting leukemia at Boston Children's Hospital. The medical bills had become mountains he could never hope to climb, and the overtime hours he worked barely kept them from drowning. But James had learned something through his suffering that these corporate titans in their tailored suits had forgotten. Dignity isn't given by others, it's chosen by yourself. If you believe that courage comes from the heart, not the wallet, and that every person deserves to be seen, please like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to our channel. Your support means everything. The meeting was already tense when it happened. Marcus Blackwell was berating his executive team for a quarterly shortfall, his voice sharp enough to cut glass when his assistant accidentally knocked over a crystal water pitcher. The cascade of water spread across the mahogany table, soaking documents and sending executives scrambling backward. Marcus's face turned crimson with rage, and he began shouting at the terrified young woman, his words cruel and cutting. She stood frozen, tears streaming down her face, her career hanging by a thread in that terrible moment. The other executives remained silent, complicit in their cowardice, unwilling to risk their own positions for her dignity. That's when James appeared in the doorway. He didn't ask permission. He simply walked in with his mop and bucket, moving past the paralyzed executives with quiet purpose. But instead of going directly to the spill, James stopped beside the crying assistant and gently placed his hand on her shoulder. Then he turned to face Marcus Blackwell directly, his eyes meeting the billionaire's furious gaze without flinching, without fear, without the submissive posture that everyone else had adopted. The room seemed to stop breathing. James spoke softly but clearly, his voice carrying the weight of a man who had faced far worse than an angry businessman. He told Marcus that accidents happen to all of us, that we're all human, and that this young woman didn't deserve to be humiliated for being human. He said that he cleaned floors every day, but that didn't mean he couldn't recognize when someone needed to clean up their behavior instead. The silence that followed was electric. Marcus Blackwell stood motionless, his mouth slightly open, his prepared fury suddenly meeting an immovable object. For the first time in years, someone had looked him in the eye and spoken truth to power. But what happened next shocked everyone even more. Marcus's expression slowly transformed, the rage melting away to reveal something underneath that looked almost like shame. He stared at this janitor in the worn uniform. This man who had nothing yet gave everything in that moment. And something cracked in the armor he had built around his heart. Marcus quietly asked James his name, then asked him to sit down. He wanted to know his story. James told him about Emma, about the hospital visits and the fear that lived in his chest every moment of every day. He spoke about working 3 jobs and still falling short, about reading bedtime stories in a hospital room and pretending everything would be okay when he wasn't sure it would be. He didn't ask for anything. He simply shared his truth, and in doing so, he held up a mirror to everyone in that room about what really mattered in life. Marcus listened in complete silence, and when James finished, the billionaire did something no one had ever seen him do. He apologized to his assistant, sincerely and without qualification. Then he turned to James and made a decision that would change multiple lives forever. If this story has touched your heart, if it reminds you that kindness is the bravest thing we can choose, please take a moment to like, comment, and share this video. Let's spread this message together. Within a week, Emma's medical bills were completely covered by an anonymous donation. James was offered a management position in the company with a salary that would secure his daughter's future. But the real transformation happened in Marcus Blackwell himself. He began requiring empathy training for all executives, implemented fair labor practices throughout his companies, and started a foundation for families facing medical hardship. The janitor who had dared to move forward when everyone else stood still had taught the billionaire something that all his wealth couldn't buy, that our humanity isn't measured by what we have, but by how we treat others when it costs us something to be kind. Please comment below with courage if this story inspired you. James Morrison continued working at Blackwell Industries, but now he walked through those halls differently, not because his circumstances had changed, but because he had reminded everyone, including himself, that standing up for what's right is never about the power you hold, it's about the person you choose to be. Emma would eventually go into remission, a miracle of medicine and the intervention that came just in time. And Marcus Blackwell would spend the rest of his life trying to become the kind of man worthy of the lesson a single father with a mop had taught him on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon when dignity finally spoke up and power finally listened.